I noticed something strange buried in the numbers. As a junior analyst, I spent my days neck-deep in financial data, but this wasn't just a rounding error. When I brought it to my boss, he didn't even pretend to look surprised. "These clients are too valuable," he said with a tight smile. "Drop it." The next morning, I was laid off, something about departmental restructuring. I didn't argue. I packed my things in silence. But before I left, I made one last stop. My name is Knox Riley. I was 28 and working at Westbrook Investment Partners in Denver. I'd been with the company for nearly 2 years. Most of my time was spent combing through spreadsheets, looking for inconsistencies others didn't catch. I wasn't the social type, rarely joined in on after-work drinks or office gossip. But I was good at data. Numbers don't bluff. Patterns don't mislead, not when you know where to look. Which is why the Harley Group portfolio raised red flags. Minor issues at first. Invoice figures not aligning with internal records, payments filtered through a rotating set of bank accounts, vendors that looked official but vanished under scrutiny. My direct supervisor, Curtis Brandt, was the kind of man who spoke in golf metaphors and wore custom-tailored suits. His office was immaculate. When I knocked that Tuesday afternoon, holding a folder marked in yellow, he barely glanced up. "What is it, Riley?" I placed the folder on his desk, pointing to the discrepancies. "There's a recurring cycle across these shell companies," I explained. "All linked to the Harley accounts. The routing pattern is identical. The numbers are inflated. It's orchestrated." He skimmed the documents, his face unreadable. Then he shut the folder and tapped it lightly. "Let it go." I nodded. I didn't protest, but I had already backed everything up to my personal drive. Something in his voice, or maybe the way his fingers hovered over the folder, told me this wasn't over. And sure enough, the next morning, Heather from HR called me into a small glass office and delivered the news. "Due to restructuring, your role is being dissolved." I was told to clear my desk before noon. My severance would be deposited by week's end. Just like that, I was disposable. Nobody looked at me when I walked out with my box of office supplies. It's jarring how fast you go from part of the team to a ghost in the hallway. I'd moved to Denver after finishing grad school in financial analysis. My grandmother had left me enough in savings to pay off my loans, but not much else. She used to say, "Your instincts matter, Knox. Trust them. Numbers are solid. People aren't." She raised me after my parents died in a wreck when I was 12. I owed her everything. Westbrook wasn't my dream job, but it was a reputable firm. I stayed late. I delivered clean work. I had built a decent track record. Curtis had interviewed me himself. Said he liked my focus. "Most people skim," he told me. "I need someone who actually reads the fine print." In hindsight, there were early signs something was off. The Harley accounts were only accessed by a select group. No one ever gave straight answers about their structure. I once overheard Curtis on the phone saying, "It's all handled, exactly like we agreed." I chalked it up to senior-level stuff. Not my concern. There was one person I vaguely knew who might have cared, Jennifer Riley from compliance. 2 floors down. We'd only exchange small talk in the kitchen or waiting for the elevator. She had a reputation, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. Once, she'd stopped by my desk after I flagged an error in another file. "Nice catch," she said, glancing around my organized desk. "Not many people check this closely." "Just part of the job," I said. She didn't smile. Just handed me her business card. "Keep doing it. And if anything doesn't feel right, my door's open." I had stuffed her card in my wallet behind my license. I never thought I'd use it. But maybe I should have reached out sooner. 2 months earlier, another junior analyst named Trevor had been quietly let go. Rumor was he'd asked questions about a real estate fund tied to Harley. No formal explanation, just gone. I hadn't put the pieces together then. I didn't want to. I liked order. Structure. Safe calculations. I wasn't a whistleblower. But I also wasn't someone who could sleep knowing money was being siphoned through fake companies. My gut told me Curtis wasn't just covering up an accounting slip. This was coordinated. Protected. And if they were willing to cut me loose for noticing, who else was being silenced? Later that week, I sat in my apartment staring at the files on my laptop. The routing numbers, shell accounts, vendor IDs, it was all there. Not just Harley, but 3 other clients had similar patterns. I considered sending an anonymous tip to the SEC. Or maybe emailing Jennifer. I hadn't made up my mind yet. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about a system built to reward silence. Office gossip travels fast. Someone said Trevor had been asking too many questions about client accounts. I assumed he'd made a mistake, gotten sloppy. Now I wasn't so sure. Maybe he saw the same things I did. The day before I uncovered the full pattern, Curtis had done something unusual. He asked me to lunch. That had never happened before. Over sandwiches in the courtyard, he asked me about my goals, if I was happy at Westbrook, told me I had potential. At the time, I thought he was being supportive. Now I realize he was testing me. Measuring my loyalty. I failed the test before I even realized it was one. The morning after I was let go, I sat in my apartment, just staring at the screen. I had forwarded all my notes and documents to my personal email. Probably not the wisest move, legally speaking. But I couldn't let it go. My instincts were screaming. I pulled everything up, line items, payment logs, vendor entries. Then I made a new spreadsheet, one I could control. Over 6 months, more than $4 million had been funneled through a maze of accounts that didn't make sense. Viewed separately, each transaction looked small. But together, they told a different story. Someone was laundering money, and Curtis wasn't just aware. He was involved. My phone lit up. A text from Alicia, another junior analyst from Westbrook. Heard what happened. So messed up. You good? Drinks tonight? I didn't reply. I wasn't in the mood to explain. I wasn't even sure who I could trust anymore. I reached for my wallet and pulled out the card I'd kept tucked away, Jennifer Riley's. Her office extension was printed neatly below her name. I stared at it, weighing my options. What would reaching out even do? I'd already been fired. Taking on a firm like Westbrook would be a nightmare. Draining, public, and likely to destroy any future in finance I had left. I'd be seen as a liability. One of those employees who caused trouble and couldn't let things go. Part of me wanted to just start fresh. Apply somewhere new. Put Westbrook behind me. But something in me resisted. My apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too tight. I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't have a destination. I ended up at City Park, the one my grandmother used to bring me to when I stayed with her during summers. I sat on a bench under the same row of trees I remembered from years ago, watching joggers pass, kids on scooters, someone's dog bounding after a ball. My grandmother's voice came back to me, as clear as if she were sitting beside me. Trust your gut, Knox. Numbers are solid. People aren't. And my gut? It told me this wasn't just fraud. It was systemic. People were being hurt. Rules were being broken because powerful men thought they'd never be held accountable. Curtis had picked his side. Now it was up to me to pick mine. When I got home, I started organizing everything. I printed 317 pages of financial data. Labeled them by client. Highlighted patterns. Wrote a short summary for each case. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt focused. Clear. The fog of uncertainty had lifted. This wasn't about Curtis anymore. It was about doing what was right. I sent a short email to Jennifer Riley. Just one line: I found something I think you should see. Can we talk tomorrow? Her reply came quickly, 9 a.m. My office. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Jennifer's office wasn't large. No windows. Just metal filing cabinets, dense binders, and compliance posters pinned to the wall. She motioned to the chair across from her desk as I walked in. I set the thick envelope on her desk and said, "I don't work here anymore. But I couldn't leave this behind." She didn't reach for the envelope right away. "Tell me what I'm about to see," she said. I explained it all. The vendor shell companies. The money trails. The repeated routing numbers. The fabricated invoices. I told her about Curtis, how he warned me to stay quiet, and how I was dismissed the next morning. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she opened the envelope and began flipping through the first few pages. "You kept internal records?" she asked after a pause. Not an accusation. Just a statement. "I did. You know that's a violation of company policy. Possibly criminal." "I know." She sat quietly for a long moment, studying me. "What exactly do you want, Knox?" "Nothing," I said. "I just couldn't ignore it." She closed the folder and slid it into her drawer. "I'll look into it. But I'm not making promises. And you should understand something. This might come back on you." I nodded and stood. "I get that." "Do you?" she asked. "Westbrook has high-profile clients. Lawyers on retainer. If what you're showing me is accurate, people could lose their careers. Go to jail. They won't go down without a fight. They've already fired me," I said. "What else can they take?" 3 days later, I found out. The letter arrived mid-morning, hand-delivered and marked certified legal correspondence from Westbrook's in-house counsel. Inside, a carefully worded threat. They were accusing me of stealing proprietary data, breaching confidentiality, and making defamatory claims. The letter demanded I surrender all documents in my possession and sign a written retraction of any statements I had made regarding financial misconduct. The closing paragraph was a warning dressed up in legal jargon. Failure to comply would result in all appropriate legal actions being pursued. I read it twice. Then a third time. The message was clear: stay quiet or get crushed. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. No caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. On impulse, I picked up. "Knox, it's Curtis." His voice was oddly casual, like we were still colleagues grabbing lunch. "We need to talk." My heart kicked, but I kept my tone even. "I don't think that's necessary." He sighed like I was being difficult. "Look, this situation's escalated. I know you're upset. But you're going about this the wrong way. If you back off now, we can work something out. Maybe even get you reinstated." "Reinstated to what, exactly?" I asked. "A team that launders client money and fires anyone who notices." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its friendly edge. "You don't know what you're getting involved in. You don't know who these people are." He caught himself. "Just meet me. 15 minutes. Coffee shop near the station." "No, you're making a mistake, Knox. A big one." I hung up and immediately scheduled a legal consultation. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but I needed guidance. Elaine Donovan came highly recommended, an attorney who specialized in whistleblower and corporate ethics cases. She listened closely as I laid out the situation from start to finish. Her expression remained unreadable throughout. "You're standing on shaky ground," she said when I finished. "But if your claims are accurate, there are federal protections for whistleblowers. The tricky part is proving causation, linking your termination to the misconduct." "So what now?" I asked. "Just let it slide." "I didn't say that," she replied. "I said be careful. You're facing a giant. We'll need direct evidence tying your firing to your discovery. Until then, you're vulnerable." On the way home, I noticed a black car parked near my building. A sedan. Same one that had tailed me leaving Elaine's office. Maybe nothing. Maybe not. But the pit in my stomach was back. Something told me I wasn't just poking at Curtis anymore. I was stepping on toes much higher up. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Curtis's words, "You don't know who you're dealing with." What did he mean? Clients? Executives inside Westbrook? I opened my laptop and started digging into the Harley Group. Their website looked polished, full of glossy mission statements and investor lingo. But their financial records? Hard to trace. Their CEO, Thomas Harley, kept a low profile, no interviews, no social media, barely a photo online. Then I stumbled across an old article. 3 years ago, the Harley Group had been under preliminary SEC investigation for suspected securities violations. The case had been dropped abruptly with no public explanation. I kept digging and found another buried report. The lead investigator on that case had retired halfway through, unexpectedly. No follow-up, no findings. It felt off. A sharp knock jolted me from the screen. It was almost midnight. I peeked through the peephole. Jennifer Riley stood there, tense, scanning the hallway. "Can I come in?" she asked when I cracked open the door. I nodded and stepped aside. She slipped inside, looking over her shoulder as I shut the door. "Were you followed?" I asked, half joking. She didn't laugh. "I don't know. Maybe." She walked to the kitchen counter and pulled a flash drive from her bag. "I've been looking deeper. There's more, Knox. A lot more. What you found, it's just the surface." She plugged the drive into my laptop. Folder after folder appeared on the screen, all time-stamped and labeled by year. Some went back 5 years. "It's not just Harley," she said, opening one. "There are at least 3 other client groups doing the same thing. Large transactions. Shell vendors. Offshore accounts. And all of them protected. Protected by who?" She met my gaze. "Jonathan Westbrook." I blinked. "The founder? The man whose name is on the firm?" I slumped into a chair. "How far up does this go?" "The CFO's in it for sure," she said. "Head of client services, too. There's a whole structure to it. They're using our firm to make the money look legitimate, then moving it out of reach. The audits are clean because they know how to work the timing." I stared at the folders on my screen, trying to process it. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Why not take it straight to the regulators?" Jennifer hesitated. "Because I needed someone who wasn't compromised. Someone who saw it for what it was, and didn't look away." "I needed to be sure," Jennifer said, her voice low. "I needed someone outside the system, someone not already compromised." I looked at her, unsure what to say. "Insurance?" I asked. "Insurance against what?" Her answer made my stomach turn. 3 years ago, an analyst named David Weber found something similar. He took it to the SEC directly. 2 days later, his car went off the road. He didn't survive. My chest tightened. "You think that wasn't an accident?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted, looking away. "But in his notes, he mentioned the Harley Group by name. It's not a coincidence." I stared at the laptop screen, at the network of names, accounts, and repeated transactions. This wasn't just misconduct. It was coordinated, organized, protected by people with power. "So what now?" I asked quietly. Jennifer closed the laptop with finality. "We go to someone who can't be silenced. Someone outside their reach." She pulled a business card from her pocket and placed it on the coffee table between us. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." She paused. "I have a contact, Agent Harding. She specializes in financial crime. But if we go to her, there's no backing out. We'll both be in this for real." I thought about Curtis's warning. The black sedan. David Weber. I nodded. "When do we meet?" "Tomorrow," she said. "Early. If you're in." "I'm in." After she left, I copied everything from her flash drive and slid it behind the loose baseboard panel in my bathroom. I needed my own insurance now. That night, I didn't sleep at my apartment. I packed a bag and checked into a budget hotel across town. There are some instincts you don't ignore. This was one of them. The next morning, we walked into a plain government building downtown. No signage. Just a code-locked door and a long hallway that smelled like dust and old carpet. The FBI's Denver field office was the exact opposite of dramatic. No dark suits or mirrored interrogation rooms. Just rows of desks and the quiet hum of fluorescent lighting. Agent Tessa Harding didn't look like someone from a crime drama. No sharp blazer or piercing stare. Just a tired-looking woman in her 40s wearing flats and a cardigan. She shook our hands and motioned for us to sit. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning." For the next 2 hours, Jennifer and I walked her through the whole story. The shell companies. The duplicated routing numbers. The timing of the transactions. The sudden terminations. Jennifer even mentioned the archived SEC case that had vanished without explanation. Agent Harding listened carefully, taking notes, asking precise questions, occasionally making short calls to cross-check a detail. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair. "If what you're saying is accurate, this isn't just corporate fraud. This is criminal enterprise, money laundering, tax evasion, possibly more. Schemes like this usually overlap with things like trafficking or bribery." Jennifer leaned forward. "So you'll investigate?" "We already are," Harding replied. "Your information lines up with a case we've been developing for a while. What you've given us strengthens it significantly." She turned to me. "But we'll need your full cooperation." "That means giving testimony, possibly in court." I sat in silence for a moment, thinking about the consequences. About how this would follow me. About how I'd be known not as a financial analyst, but as the guy who turned on his firm. But then I thought of my grandmother's voice in my head, "Do the right thing, even when it's the hard thing." "I'll do it," I said. Harding nodded. "Good. We'll proceed carefully. These people have influence. They'll fight to stay hidden. Tell no one you met with us. No friends. No family. Not even colleagues you think you can trust." She handed us each a card with a single number printed in bold black. "If anything strange happens, anything at all, call this number immediately. Don't wait." As we exited the building, Jennifer placed a hand on my arm. "You should stay off-grid a bit longer. At least until this starts moving." "I already have," I told her. 2 nights in a cheap motel. You're not the only one who plans ahead." A faint smile played across her lips. "When Curtis hired you, he told everyone you were too quiet to cause problems. Looks like he was wrong. He's not the first," I said. Later that afternoon, I interviewed for a position at a smaller firm on the other side of the city. I didn't mention Westbrook. I didn't mention the investigation. I just focused on my skills, data analysis, financial risk, pattern recognition. The hiring manager seemed interested. Said they'd be in touch soon. 3 days passed. Then, as I stepped out of my hotel room with a coffee in hand, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. The message was short. Level 3 parking. Blue Honda. 20 minutes. No name. But only one person knew I was staying at this hotel. Jennifer. I considered calling Agent Harding. I considered ignoring the text altogether. But curiosity got the better of me. I took precautions, parked on level 4, came down the stairs instead of using the elevator, and stayed behind a pillar as I approached. The Honda was there. Engine off. Driver's side window halfway down. But it wasn't Jennifer. It was Trevor. The analyst who'd vanished months ago without a word. "Get in," he said quickly. I froze, scanning his face for signs of danger. "Why?" "It's about Jennifer," he said, his voice tight. "Please." I got in. "Yesterday," Trevor said, "before they took her." My chest tightened. "Took her? Who did?" "Westbrook's internal security. They're claiming she stole confidential client data. She's being held for questioning by their legal team right now. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated and shaken. Look, I know what you and Jennifer found. I saw it too, 6 months ago. That's why they fired me. I didn't realize how far it went until now. Then why show up now? I asked, not ready to trust him yet. Because Jennifer helped me when no one else did. She believed me when I had no proof. And because what's happening inside Westbrook, it's worse than we imagined. He reached into his jacket and handed me a small USB drive. This contains detailed data on offshore accounts, falsified financials, and voice recordings of conversations between Westbrook execs and Harley Group reps. Jennifer smuggled it off her system before they froze her access. I stared down at the device, feeling the weight of it despite its size. Why didn't you give this to the FBI yourself? I asked. Trevor looked around the garage nervously. Because Westbrook has influence, high up. Jennifer thought you might know someone we could trust outside their network. I immediately thought of Agent Harding. Her unassuming presence. The way she grasped the scope of the case without hesitation. Yes, I said. I do. From Trevor's car, I dialed the number Agent Harding had given us. I explained the situation, Jennifer being detained, the contents of the drive, the urgency. Within the hour, we were routed to a separate FBI field office. Different location. Different agents. They treated the information as sensitive, isolating the files and creating encrypted backups while confirming some of the data on the spot. By early evening, things moved into high gear. Jennifer was picked up by federal agents as she left the Westbrook offices, officially for her own protection. Meanwhile, search warrants were being finalized. I was relocated to a secure site for the night, a temporary safe house under FBI watch. The last call I made before I turned in was to Elaine Donovan. They're moving in tomorrow, I said. I need you there. I'll be there, she replied without hesitation. Knox, no matter what happens, you did the right thing. Alone in the sterile hotel room, I couldn't help but reflect. 3 weeks ago, I was just another junior analyst, anonymous, unnoticed. Now I was a key witness in one of the largest financial fraud investigations in years. It was surreal. But I didn't feel afraid anymore. I felt resolved. The raid began at exactly 9:02 a.m. on a Tuesday. Federal agents entered Westbrook Investment Partners from every point of access. Simultaneous teams executed searches at the homes of Jonathan Westbrook, the firm's founder, the CFO, and 3 senior-level partners. Another squad entered the Harley Group's Denver headquarters. It was fast, coordinated, and loud. From the back seat of Agent Harding's vehicle, parked discreetly across the street, I watched the chaos unfold. Employees streamed out of the building, confused and murmuring. Some were pulled aside and interviewed on the sidewalk. Others stood in clusters, staring at their phones, trying to piece it together in real time. Then I saw him, Curtis Brandt. He was being walked to a black SUV by 2 federal agents. No cuffs, but his body language said everything. Tense. Cornered. His eyes flicked toward the street, and for just a second, they met mine. There was no shock in his face. No rage. Just resignation. He looked like a man who had finally run out of moves. He's flipping, Harding said beside me, watching closely. He's trying to make a deal. Of course he was. I almost laughed. By noon, the media had caught wind of the story. National headlines: major investment firm raided in federal investigation. They mentioned a whistleblower. My name hadn't been released yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Later that afternoon, Jennifer called me from her lawyer's office. They're offering immunity deals to employees who cooperate, she said. People like us, the ones lower on the ladder. But the execs? They're done. What about Jonathan Westbrook? I asked. Arrested at his home. They found shredded documents in his fireplace. Not subtle. And the Harley Group? Thomas Harley left the country last week, she said. But the government's frozen all their assets. It's only a matter of time before they catch up. 2 days later, I sat in a quiet federal prosecutor's office, reviewing my statements again. We walked through every file, every conversation, every detail I had documented. The evidence was undeniable. Jennifer's flash drive. Trevor's files. My original spreadsheet. Financial records seized during the raid. On top of that, 6 more Westbrook employees had come forward, finally willing to testify. Each of them had witnessed parts of the scheme, some even warned not to ask too many questions. The prosecutor, Diane Lawrence, listened patiently. She was sharp, focused, no nonsense. When we finished reviewing everything, she slid the stack of printed evidence in front of her and looked up at me. "This case is going to trial," she said. "And it's going to be big." She placed the folder on the table. "Mr. Shaw, your testimony is vital to this case. But I want you to understand what lies ahead. The defense will come after your credibility. They'll call you bitter. They'll imply incompetence, maybe even say this is personal revenge. It won't be easy." "I understand," I said. "Are you ready for that?" I thought of Curtis's threat. Of Jennifer being pulled into a backroom by Westbrook's legal team. Of David Weber, whose name never made it to court. Of the warning signs I ignored until they weren't signs anymore, they were alarms. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The first indictments were issued 1 week later. Jonathan Westbrook, his CFO, and 2 senior partners were officially charged with fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Curtis Brandt's name appeared too. Facing lesser charges, a result of the deal he made to cooperate. The morning the indictments were announced, I received an email from the financial firm I'd interviewed with weeks earlier. They had heard about my role, not from the papers, but through quiet conversations in industry circles. The offer included a higher salary than I'd expected and a personal message from the CEO. "We need people like you. People who don't look away." I accepted. A month later, a letter arrived from the SEC. Because the information I'd provided directly led to enforcement action, I was eligible for a reward through the whistleblower program. The figure at the bottom of the letter made my eyes widen. It was more than compensation. It was security, real, lasting security. I wouldn't have to worry about money for a long time. That evening, I drove to the cemetery. I brought fresh daisies, my grandmother's favorite, and placed them by her headstone. "You were right," I said softly. "Trust your gut." I could almost hear her voice again. Soft, amused, proud. 6 months after the raid, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, reviewing Q2 reports for my new employer. The work was challenging in the right ways. The people valued integrity. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Former Westbrook CEO pleads guilty to federal charges. Jonathan Westbrook had taken a deal, 7 to 10 years. He wouldn't be the last to face sentencing. The company itself had collapsed. What was left of it? Its legitimate assets had been picked apart and sold off to competitors. The Westbrook name now existed only in court records and headline archives. I closed the alert and went back to my reports. The headlines had moved on. New scandals, new crises. But the effects of what we exposed lingered. Tighter regulations. Mandatory compliance audits. Ethics modules and MBA programs using Westbrook as a case study. Curtis avoided jail. His sentence was suspended in exchange for testimony. He ended up in Nebraska, working for his brother-in-law's insurance agency. I received one email from him months later. It opened with, "I hope you understand." I never read the rest. Jennifer found her footing again. A regulatory firm hired her within weeks of the raid. She was leading investigations now, her skills finally recognized for what they were. We met for coffee from time to time. There was a quiet understanding between us, a shared experience that didn't require constant discussion. We weren't exactly friends, but we had history. That was enough. Trevor moved to Seattle. He wanted nothing to do with finance again. Last I heard, he was doing systems analysis at a tech startup and hiking on weekends. I didn't blame him. As for me, I was settling into my new role. The job pushed me, but in a good way. My new manager appreciated the fact that I paid attention to things others missed. That I didn't compromise. That I asked uncomfortable questions. The whistleblower payout sat mostly untouched in a secure investment account. I'd used a portion of it to buy a small home just outside the city. It had a garden. Nothing fancy, but it was peaceful. My grandmother would have loved it. I still checked over my shoulder more than most people. I still backed up every file twice. I still read between the lines, especially the ones everyone else skipped. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't paranoid. I was simply aware. That awareness let me sleep at night. I finished my coffee, packed up my laptop, and was just about to leave when a young man approached my table. Mid-20s, fresh haircut, nervous hands gripping a leather portfolio. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Matthew Shaw?" I paused, cautious. "Yes. I'm Jason. I just started at Meridian Financial. They told me to reach out to you about our compliance structure. Said you'd be the best person to explain why it matters." I looked at him for a moment. Eager. Unpolished. Reminded me of myself. Before everything changed. "Have a seat," I said, motioning to the empty chair. "Let me tell you a story. About patterns. And why noticing them could be the most important thing you ever do." He opened his notebook, pen ready. And I began at the beginning. Because sometimes the strongest stand you can take isn't by shouting. It's by seeing what others refuse to, and refusing to look away.